Vikings are 1-4. What's your take on this? It's a very interesting one when you look not just at the record, but the underlying metrics and the film. We're going to talk a lot about this team, their immediate future, and their what's the right phrasing? Their long-term future. This team is set up in a very interesting way. Welcome to the Real Forno Show.
Welcome to the Real Forno Show, hosted by Tyler Forness, the managing editor of USA Today's Vikings Wire, writer for the College Football Network, publisher of Substack Run In Shooter, host of The Good, The Bad, and The Hungry on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, as well as a founding member of Vikings First and SKOL.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Real Forno Show. I'm your host, Tyler Forness. With me, as always, Mr. 6-0, producer Dave. Dave, how are you?
I'm doing great on this Monday. It's a miserable day after another loss.
I heard you want to fight with me today, so let's start fighting.
Oh, not necessarily.
Listen, I think there's a lot that we're going to talk about today, and it's not going to be a lot about the Vikings' loss to the Chiefs because they played relatively well. They shot themselves in the foot, and they got burned a little bit. It was a mixed bag, and they just unfortunately came out on the wrong side of it. But we're going to talk first about this offensive line, and that's going to be the real linchpin in the entire conversation. And I'm just going to say it, and I know it's going to be really weird to hear. The Vikings have a very good offensive line, and they proved it again this week. Now, it's not a flawless offensive line, but one of the big things with offensive line play is unless you're diving into the nitty gritty of it, a lot of offensive line play is like viewed and talked about on reputation. That's the right word for it. So if you have a reputation that you stink, like Ed Ingram did last year, it's really hard to shake that. Is that fair? No, but it's just reality. Offensive line play is a lot less tangible than something like playing quarterback or wide receiver. A lot lower of a profile when you talk about individual performance. So that's where we're at here. This offensive line is good, and they've been playing really well. They are PFF's number 2 pass blocking unit, number 1 run blocking unit. And when you think about that type of success, it really begs the question, what's going wrong? Why isn't this team playing better? There are a lot of reasons for that. I would put almost none of it on the play calling. Yeah, execution means more with some of this stuff than the actual play calling itself. I think the play calling has been creative. I think it's been cohesive. And I think Kevin O'Connell's done a great job of putting players in positions to succeed. I said on the live show yesterday that I thought this was Kirk Cousins' best game. I'm going to pull back a little bit on that. I don't think it was his best game anymore, but I still think he was good. There were too many times, and I'm only through like the second quarter of the All-22, where he had a beautiful pocket. And if you go to my Twitter profile right now, at The Real Forno, pull up another tab, you'll still be able to hear me. Then you can come back and see this beautiful face. But go look at some of the clips I've already shared. It's clean pockets. Kirk has a very clean pocket to operate with. It's really astounding on how well this offensive line has been blocking, and it feels weird. It's okay to feel weird to say that the Vikings have a good offensive line, but these resources that they've continued to put into it, Ed Ingram, 2nd round pick, Christian Darrisaw, 1st round pick, Ezra Cleveland, 2nd round pick, Brian O'Neill, 2nd round pick, Garrett Bradbury, 1st round pick. They're finally playing up to their draft stocks as a unit. And it's not a flawless group. They're still allowing sacks. They're still allowing pressures. But what I want to say is when they're allowing pressure, it's either a free blitzer where Leo Chanel had a sack They brought 7 guys. The Vikings only had 6 to block. They didn't have a hot route because of what concepts they were running. And that happens every once in a while.
What got me on that play, though, was Josh Oliver, I believe, was the one that went out. He did not chip on the way out. He purposely avoided the rusher to get into his route. If he would have chipped, he would have slowed him down just a bit. Now, granted, he would have slowed down on his route just a bit, but it may have helped. And I think that's a protection call thing and coaching, because normally when a tight end's going out from the offensive line, they like to chip and clean up somebody on the way to their route, because it helps the quarterback in the process, because it delays that rush just that little bit. And I didn't see that. To me, it looked like he was told, don't touch him, go around like he did. And you had 7 on 6, and it was straight shot to Kirk Cousins, bam, down.
So here's my thought process on it. And I genuinely don't know for sure if this is the case, Dave, because I'm not sure within the construct of this play call, the rules that were given to these players. And you kind of laid it out nicely that, like, in theory, he should be chipping. In reality, is he supposed to be? Because the way that he and Hawkinson are running these routes, they're like, I have the all 22 clip actually pulled up on my laptop right now as we're talking. And I think it's an interesting play because Hawkinson's running a post. So if you're looking at Oliver and O'Neal on this play, because the pressure comes right around Brian O'Neal on the right side. It's Oliver next to O'Neal, Hawkinson on the other side. They're running a scissors concept. And here's what a scissors concept is. You have the inside guy running a corner route. And then on the other side, so the corner's going right here, and then Hawkinson's running a post. So they cross. A lot of times it's called X scissors. All right. That route concept is meant to mess with like quarters coverage on the back end, because they have to figure out if they're passing off or if they're staying. So if you have the inside guy passing off, so he lets Josh Oliver go to the corner, but then the outside guy follows Hawkinson, you have a wide open Josh Oliver. And on the other side, they're running a flag concept. So you have 2 different concepts at work here trying to attack the defense. Well, in order for this concept to work, you can't do that kind of chip. So my theory, Dave, here is he was told not to. And the only way this play doesn't have a chance of working is if you bring 7 and they just brought 7. And sometimes you just kind of have to eat it, which really sucks because you don't want to eat a sack like that. But the way this route concept was built, you have to let these guys get that kind of release so they can get out deep. Because if Hawkinson crosses like a good 3-4 yards before Oliver even breaks out, that's a problem, because that's not going to sell to the deep defenders well enough to where they can get that kind of confusion and create some separation. And that's one of the issues with Kevin O'Connell offense sometimes. There have been too many instances, which is understandable to a point, where there's no hot route. And if the blitz is coming that heavy and there's nowhere to throw the football immediately, well, that's what hot routes are designed for, where if you have that kind of blitz, you can check into something and bada bing, bada boom. My guess is Cam Akers on that play was supposed to be the hot route guy, but he's blocking. And this is where you have some of those instances where it's just frustrating. And sometimes you just get out called. And Steve Spagnuolo did it. A lot of times the Vikings have done so on offense. The 2 Jordan Madison post route touchdowns, they schemed those against the defense. They won those plays. So I'm looking at it from a sense of, you know what? We just got beat straight up, and I live with it.
I would have hoped to try to, if they ever see that again, have an option to, rather than TJ and Josh doing the scissors, doing the cross, have one of the wide receivers on outside of Josh be the one that crosses over, and then you let Josh chip and then float out into the flat, and then he's available for a hot route dump off type of pass. Once his guy gets past him, he's delayed him enough that Kirk can see it, turn around, and, loft it over the top of his head. But that wasn't a play called. I'm not the coach.
Yeah, and I'm trying to find a way to phrase this, because you're right, but sometimes with the way they have some of these things designed, and for a lot of different reasons, sometimes rules are just different, where conceptually maybe they shouldn't be. It's almost like putting a bill in front of Congress, and you think it should go this way, and it makes sense that it goes this way, but by the time everybody gets their hands on it, there's a bunch of different rules and regulations. It's not the same as like pork belly fat that you would see tacked onto a bill, but things can change over the course of time when more people have their hands on it, and that I think that can happen with play calling a little bit, Dave, just because there are so many different things and different things you're going to encounter on a game-to-game basis. So this play may be tweaked a little bit, and it was something that I learned a few months ago when I was talking about the run game on football.
Sorry about the length of that comment.
That's fine. Hey, you know what? I love that kind of passion where we've got people that are writing that much and are that passionate about the Vikings. That's why we're here. We care about the Vikings. The difference is we're going to tell you exactly what we think about them, and we're not going to sugarcoat. We're just going to be honest. And I think that's honestly the joy of the show and network. And please like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, all the things. We're going to have a lot of fun stuff. If the Vikings are really good, we're going to have a lot of fun stuff about predicting the immediate future. If the Vikings are really bad, you're going to love draft content from us. It's going to be a lot of fun. So, what was I saying? The one thing that I learned, and it was Jeff Schwartz, former Vikings offensive lineman, that pointed this out. There can be different rules with zone runs based on who you're playing. Mm-hmm. And that can be like game plan specific, which I found very interesting. How, like, on a wide zone run, your responsibility is this. But it might be different based on if you're playing the 49ers, the Cowboys, the Packers, the Falcons, because you have different types of players and you need to be able to do some of those things. Hey, look who's in the chat.
Type of defensive schemes you're going up against.
Yeah.
Dave, and they have their
own
rules.
We got Viking Jerome back in the house. I haven't seen Viking Jerome in a long time. Welcome back, sir.
Welcome back, Jerome.
Yeah, so I think that's interesting. It's something to at least contextualize here with like that specific play. But I want to talk more about the offensive line play. I don't know if I mentioned it at the top. They're PFF's number 2 pass blocking unit and PFF's number 1 run blocking unit. That's really good, but it also shows the flaws of this team because they haven't been able to take advantage of that yet. Kirk Cousins has been inconsistent and rough with his decision-making at times. And I thought he could have been a little bit more aggressive against the Chiefs yesterday. There was one play, and it was one of the plays that I posted on Twitter where he had a great pocket. He could have anticipated a dig across the middle. It was tight coverage, but if you throw that ball right, which he is more than capable of doing, I mean, you're not throwing it into like a super tight window. There's just a guy trailing behind that could have made a play on the ball, but if you throw it right, like, it's fine. And you can make a play and trust your receiver to go grab it. I think the limitations you have at quarterback and at running back as well, Alexander Madison can't see. And it's like, look, he can physically actually see things. But
imagine him there with the ball and the blind cane going through the line, feeling for a hole.
Yeah, and it's frustrating that he's not able to really maximize his potential. He runs hard, great human being. He does a lot of stuff to for underprivileged children, and he's just a very nice person to talk to. But he's not a starting caliber running back in the NFL. And
I thought he ran. I wasn't disappointed in his running yesterday. I'm
just talking in overall sense, not like a single game sample size.
Right.
Like
now,
he
his
has
dropped screen pass, I was a little perturbed over, but that was because it was perfect, right where it needed to be, on his hands, the whole works, and he started to look to run prior to catching the football. That is a sickness that wide receivers and running backs often get.
Let's use this as a transition point, because the offensive line, look, it's good, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And we're going to talk a little bit more about it and how we're going to parse out the future of this football team later in the show. But I want to use that screen pass as like a jumping off point to talk about Kevin O'Connell. Yesterday was not his best game, especially with his game management skills. They were bad, and a lot of it has to do with discipline. Being situational masters is what they talked about, and that was how they ended up with a 13-4 record. They took advantage of situations, and they were ready for anything that was thrown at them. Well, unfortunately, that has not reared the same way that it did last year, and it's very frustrating when you look at everything, because this team should be really good at those things, because it's not like you all of a sudden forget how to manage the clock, or you forget how to understand and step up your game in a different way when the time is running out. You don't just forget that kind of stuff. They're just not executing. And O'Connell needs to get these guys in a better discipline. Everybody knows I'm a big Florida Gator fan. If you watch the Florida Gators this year, they're not a bad football team. In fact, I would say they are a good football team. The biggest thing about the Florida Gators that's inherently frustrating, Dave, discipline is lacking. If any of those guys were in your platoon in the military, you'd want to kill them, because they'd be making you run and march for hours on end because of the lack of discipline. That's the entirety of why they have lost 2 football games. Discipline, dumb penalties, not fitting the run, not tackling well. It's all discipline stuff. And this is what happened with the Vikings this past weekend. Kevin O'Connell did not have the right discipline with this football team. It was just a struggle. And when you kind of take a look at all of those factors, it really sucks, because this could have been a win, but the discipline factors and the lack of timeouts really killed them. And if you just have one timeout at the end, that's an extra 50 seconds. 50 seconds goes a long way when you're trying to march down the field. You could throw the ball over the middle twice and throw 2 passes to the sidelines. That's 50 yards. That's 50 seconds. Like, you're talking about how that one timeout could have been 4 positive plays to move you down the field and get you in position to score a touchdown. That means a lot.
Hey, it started out game 1 since the beginning of this season. Our first drives are miserable. First game, punt. Next one, fumble. Next one, I think, was the fumble. Then comes the 99-yard pick 6. Then fumble. And I may have the pick 6 out of order, but it's been nothing but one punt and a bunch of turnovers. And they've been outscored in that first quarter 27-3. They're not disciplined. They should come out firing. And they haven't been. And it's not just been one person, right? Mm-hmm. KOC complains about the fumbling. And yes, you learn that in Pop Warner. You do not want to put the ball on the ground. Ball security. It's drilled into you. Bang, bang, bang. Ball security. All the way through football, you're pounded with ball security. And yet, it's not generally one person. It's everybody that's dropped the football so far. And then when it comes to that, as much as KOC's doing with buying ball vibrators or broomsticks to knock balls out, having guys carry it, it's not working. There is a disconnect whether he's too nice and coddling or players aren't getting it. They're, saying, hey, last year we had all those one-score games and we won. We don't have to change anything. And now we're having the one-score games and they're losing. Something is off. And partially, I think part of that is something's off with KOC as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and let's kind of transition here, Dave, to the good. Because I think what gets lost about Kevin O'Connell is the execution. And you straight up mentioned the screen pass that Alexander Mattison dropped that would have gone for a sure touchdown.
Or at least gotten inside the 10. Yes.
People will blame the play calling. Excuse me.
Good play.
It was a phenomenal play call. Great use of situation, and it worked. Except for the drop pass. It was perfectly designed. They had proper spacing on the outside, multiple lead blockers. Mattison should have scored there. And his wanting to just make a play with the ball rather than secure and then turn upfield is what did them in. And you know what? That happens. But that also boils back down to the discipline angle, Dave. Mm-hmm. Wanting to do something before you've just done the basic. It's like putting a steak on the grill without making sure that the grill is hot. You don't put a steak on the grill first. You get those iron grates hot before you slap that steak on there. Like the little things matter. And you have to make sure that you have the little things down. And Mattison, quite frankly, just blew it. And it's tough because Kevin O'Connell gets blamed for some of the stuff, but it's not his fault. It really isn't.
But he's the head coach. The buck stops at the head coach.
Yeah, but if Mattison drops it, yeah, you can do some things to fix it. But it's not a play calling issue. It's not a issue of anybody else. It's one player, and you just have to fix that one issue. You're 100% right. The buck stops with Kevin O'Connell. But it's the why behind what the problem is and what the issue is that needs to be fixed. That is the disconnect between what I believe is reality and some people's opinions. And that's what we're talking about.
It very well may be, but it seems so far this season, the team plays well most of the time. And then there's the one oopsies by Mattison in this case, or dropsies by TJ Hawkinson, or heck, even JJ dropped a ball on Sunday. There's one of those things in each game by a multitude of people that cause the inefficiencies, the lack, the stalling of drives, the losing of the ball and possession. All that stuff builds up. You can play 90%, everybody's playing perfect, right? They're playing great, getting graded great. They look great, playing great, tons of talent. Mm-hmm. But when that one person out of 11 messes up on a play, that's costing them. And it's not, a whole bunch of people messing up on one play. It's one person on this play, another person on that play, another person on this play. And the accumulation of those plays that have mess up have put the Vikings behind the power curve the entire season so far. They don't come out of their shells until they're 2 scores down and playing catch up. And that has to be stopped. We didn't have that last year. Yes, we had mistakes last year. Every team has mistakes. You can't play perfect football. But you try to minimize those as much as possible. And it doesn't seem to have happened so far this season. Now I'm hearing excuses. Well, Dave, we played, all these playoff teams so far. So, all right, quality. But as Justin says, everybody coming up on our schedule next is going, ooh, we got the easy part of the schedule next. We're playing the Minnesota Vikings. It's unbelievable. Dave, yes, that was a great 4th down punt fake. Absolutely. Brilliantly called.
What was wild about that punt fake is it didn't even look like we caught him by surprise. They just nailed it. Mm-hmm. Like the blocking was really well done. And Chandler hit the hole, burst through it, and used his speed and quickness to be able to get the edge. And 15 yards, first down, and that got the Vikings on the board. I think that drive ended in a touchdown to Jordan Addison, which, like, look, sometimes you have to create your own luck. And we've talked about that with Kirk Cousins and had the willingness to take chances down the field. I'm not saying be reckless. Pick your opportunities. It's like watching a NASCAR race. You can't just try to pass every single turn. You can't. You have to set them up. You have to get the right run, and you have to do it the right way. Otherwise, it could just backfire on you, and you could end up losing ground. And that's kind of what we're asking Kirk to do. Be more aggressive. Just pick a few more shots a game. Like, be aggressive on like 2 more throws. That's it. We're not asking the world. If you throw the ball 35 times, 2 of those throws where you decide to not be as aggressive, just be more aggressive. And you know what? Something that we've talked about on the show since its inception, Dave. If he throws a pick in a couple of those situations, okay, that's fine. You live with it. And that's why I didn't criticize him for having 14 picks last year. Why? He was trying to drive the ball down the field and make plays and trust his receivers. Sometimes you get burned. Sometimes it's frustrating, but that's why each pick has to be graded on its own curve. And you don't just look at the total number and be like, oh, he stinks. Why? The motif of this show, every stat has context. In order to understand it, you have to find it. And that is going to be the big thing here moving forward. And that's why I think like the whole discussion about Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, it's so incomplete right now. And I can understand,
without a doubt.
I can understand some trepidation by people where they're okay. I don't think Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell are doing a good job, but they're also not doing a bad job. It's you have to give people in these positions time. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah doesn't have this roster in a place where he feels like it's comfortable for him. He doesn't believe that this group is his. It's Rick Spielman's, and he's working through some of those things. Now,
yeah, he's halfway through the competitive rebuild.
Yeah. And in order to truly understand if his vision is going to work, you have to let him finish it. You can't just tell Stephen King, oh, you're halfway through the book. I'm going to have Tom Clancy finish it. What? That doesn't make sense, does it? Like, that's kind of where we're at here. You have to let them finish the process, at least their initial vision. When they go in and they interview the ownership and front office or personnel, you have a conversation, be like, okay, X, Y, and Z. This is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to get there. And the second, let's say it's a 3-year plan. At the end of the 3-year plan, then you can have a real conversation. Be like, okay, this is what your vision is. Where are we at? Are we trending in a positive direction? What were the mistakes made? Did we learn from them? Did we grow from them? Did they cripple us? Because remember, Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch handpicked Trey Lance. They dumped him for a 4th-round pick after 2 years. They just got extensions. You know why? Kyle Shanahan is the best head coach in football, arguably. He's arguably the best play caller in football. And they were a healthy quarterback away from potentially making the Super Bowl last year. So that's why some of this stuff it matters for guys like Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell. Because you have to understand where the vision is going, what the vision is, and let it play out. And then once you've given it an ample amount of time, and that's why the 3-year mark is usually what happens with general managers and head coaches, because it gives you enough time to get everything that you want in place and see where things are trending. If they're not trending well, you move on and you figure out, okay, where do we go now from here without this person in the building? And that's why this offseason, I think, is so pivotal, especially for Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, because it's going to be the first where he's going to get to pick the quarterback. He's going to get to mold the positions like the defensive line in his image. The offensive line is molded in his image right now. He has
closer
talent
to it.
at the wide receiver positions. They have a great defensive coordinator in Brian Flores, who at this point, I don't think he would be considered a super great candidate for a head coaching job, but we also know how well he did at Miami. So who knows? That's a wild card. But
hopefully he's not, and he stays for next year. And then if he goes after that, we get the compensation pick.
Mm-hmm. There are also so few players under contract through 2024 that he has so much flexibility to do whatever he wants. And that is the real intriguing part for this future, this Minnesota Vikings team, because there is zero certainty. The only certainty is they want Justin Jefferson in the building. They want TJ Hawkinson in the building. They want Christian Darrisaw and Brian O'Neill. Those are your core four. Now, you want Jordan Addison to be a part of that. You want Danielle Hunter and Marcus Davenport to be a part of that. But the only ones that are really a guarantee are the two tackles, Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson. Addison's still a work in progress. He's a rookie. So that's the core you're building around. And how can you move forward? How can you build around those players? And I think we're really going to find out what Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah is made of here, Dave, because this is now going to be his vision, not just trying to fix the issues that Rick Spielman had. And I genuinely don't know if he's going to be able to do it. It's a wild card. It is a variable in the math problem that is the Minnesota Vikings. Will he be able to? I think so. But I can't say with any form of like real confidence. I believe the vision that he has on an overall level, based on what we know, it is working. Will it be able to take that next step? Only time will tell. But I'll tell you this, I feel really good about it. And I just want to point out before you move on here, Dave, a couple of things in the comments. Jay Giza says trading down from 12 to 32 with nothing to show for it is telling. I understand your frustration. I completely do. But I want this to be thought of as well when we're talking about that trade. We need to have a little bit more time, because right now you have like Ed Ingram is a byproduct of that trade. Ed Ingram's hitting right now. Andrew Booth got a few snaps. If Evans is out for any period of time, he's going to get more snaps. He's going to get nickel snaps. And we will hear and we will see more about it. Now, right now it doesn't look great, but I think going into year 3, we're going to be able to have a much deeper and more meaningful conversation on that trade back. And then lastly, Dave L says that I'm the only show that he can listen to this week. He gets people are angry, but he can't deal with the hatred towards management. Kirk is terrible in pressure moments, and you hear crickets. Like, hey, I appreciate the kind words. And the big thing is, like, we're just gonna be honest. And yeah, we're frustrated. We don't want to be 1-4. We'd rather be 4-1. But sometimes it's about finding the answers. And sometimes the answers are ones you want to hear, and sometimes they're ones you don't want to hear. Now, I'm going to go back to this point because Patrick makes an interesting comment. There's really no defending that trade at all. This is where we have the conversation about process versus results. The process of the trade makes sense in the fact that they wanted to get more picks. They picked up they got a first, they got a second, and they got a third, which is basically a second anyways. You can argue they gave up too much depending on the chart. The old school chart said they did. The new school chart said they won. And that general process is good. Then they flipped 34 to get 53 and 59. Then they moved 53 and 2 other picks to go get 42. The process they used to make those moves was good. It stinks that the results haven't really matched up with that process yet. And that is incredibly frustrating. And I don't blame anybody for being frustrated about that. Raymond's right. We didn't hear about Ingram once in that game. That's important. Now, just understand that if results don't always come with process, good process will yield good results in time. I think that was good process. And did it work? No, it hasn't worked out yet. You know what? At the end of the day, we may say that process didn't end up working out. That doesn't mean the process to get there wasn't good. It's like buying a McDonald's, and McDonald's is arguably a very safe company because they're like world leaders in sales. But sometimes like a McDonald's just may not work out. It happens. But the process of owning a McDonald's, if you run it right, is good because it does really good business consistently year over year. Like this is kind of what the situation we're in with Kwesi. Like he's using good process. It just hasn't worked out. And Patrick, I feel you, but to me, that's not you're mad about the process. You're just mad about which players they got and didn't get. And I think that's a different conversation.
Well, Mateo says, can't stand how Kwesi thinks he's outsmarting people by drafting injury-prone people. That's a gamble. And that may be one he learns from and says, I'm shying away from that. Because if they hit and people, are suddenly healthy because injuries sometimes work that way,
yeah,
then he's, gold. But he can, get 3 or 4 of those guys, and 3 or 4 of them don't pan out because those injuries keep on following them. Mm-hmm. It's a roll of the dice. And so far, he seems to have crapped out on that roll of the dice. But the thought process behind it of let's take a chance, we can't afford, and this goes for free agency, we can't afford the higher price guys, so we're going to take this medium price guy with upside. Yes, he has an injury history, and maybe he hits like we want him to and stays injury free, and we're golden. It just hasn't happened that way yet.
Yeah, and I think one of the big things here is that everybody bets on injured guys because sometimes injuries just never go away. Jason Verrett, the cornerback out of TCU, gets drafted. I think he's had like 6 season-ending injuries, and that may be slight hyperbole, but I don't think it is. He's just had that many injury issues. But eventually, the more injuries a guy has, the less you're able to sign them for. But when they play, they're great. And that's kind of what we're at with Marcus Davenport. Like a high ankle sprain. Look, that's just a football injury. It happens. But the 2 games he's played, nobody can sit here and say that he hasn't been really good because he has. And every team makes those gambles. I think one of the more famous teams that has made those gambles is Philly. Jalen Carter had character concerns coming out. And I'll never forget, there's a pass rusher. His name's Josh Sweat. He signed a big contract extension with the Eagles a year or 2 ago. First round talent. Fell to round 4 because he had like no cartilage in his knees. Like that doesn't scream long NFL career, but they took him around 4 and he's been great and he's still playing. And it's like year 6. Like you have to take some risks. The key is understanding, like with the information they have, is trying to mitigate them as best as you can. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. But you have to be willing to take risks in this business. And if you don't end up taking risks, it's never going to work. You have to be willing to shoot the moon. And the key is, like, let's specifically talk Andrew Booth. So we know he had a bunch of injuries coming out, and he's dealt with injuries for the majority of his college career.
Oh, since high school.
The key here is if let's say that process ends up failing, look back on it. Okay, why did it fail? And then look at the player, look at the injuries, and look at how they're interconnected, this, that, or the other thing. And then how do you move forward and learn from that? How do you make sure you don't make that mistake again? And I think that is where, because general managers only hit about 30% of their draft picks. It's like a hitter in baseball. Some guys who are great at, hit 40%. And those are the teams that make Super Bowls. So if the Vikings can end up figuring out how to hit 40% of their picks, like, you're going to grow and learn in that process over the course of time. And I'm very intrigued to see how that ends up playing out, because there are just elements to it that you have to have some risk. It's not like all their things in this life. Like, it's not like, oh, I'm going to try this new hot sauce. I hope it's not too hot. Like, it's a little more complicated than that. So, yeah. I'm going to take a drink now.
But, when it comes to Kwesi, him and KOC both are rookies basically last year. I chalk a lot of that up to learning, because you don't come in and be a wonder kid straight off the bat. That has never happened that I'm aware of. Anytime, even with the greatest GMs or the greatest head coaches, there's a learning period. And today's society, we all want it now, right?
Yes.
You've got to be able to wait. When it comes to the offensive line, there was a question about, is Ezra and Ed a wrong scheme fit? Well, that's an interesting question. Do you want to use them more power gap than you do zone blocking? And we can get into that. But if you look at them, and if you look at you opened up with talking about the grades, Ezra and Ed were our top 10 guards per PFF. Now, I'm going to hear it right now. PFF's garbage. They don't know what the heck they're doing or what the heck they're looking at. Could be. I'm not disputing that. But PFF, that applies to all 32 teams. So if you think they, suck at evaluating O-line, that same suckitude goes straight across all 32 teams. And where they rank these guys is where they go, whether it's done in a sucky manner or if it's done perfectly and they know exactly what they're doing. And I think it's somewhere in between, but I think it's a relatively good process. Once you learn what they're looking for and how they evaluate, it's a good process. So you're comparing the whole league, whereas we just watch these guys on Sunday and we see our guys. We're not seeing the entire league. And yes, there are some players that are better, but most teams don't have them. Absolutely not. Most teams don't have them. And it's taken a while to develop. If you can take a second-round guard and suddenly he's playing almost, other than his small handful of screw-ups, exceptional, that is amazing, because you've only had him for a little over a season. I've always preached it takes 3 to 4 years for an offensive lineman nowadays to develop, because they don't come in this way into the NFL. And ours are doing well. Ezra's in his 4th year, and he's scoring higher than he ever has. Now, does Ezra want to be a tackle? I'm sure he does. But I think Ed, we will stick to it, and he will be just fine going forward. I think one of the reasons you're not seeing Reisner, besides playing shape, is that Ed is doing rather well. Yeah.
And you don't mess with offensive line continuity. If something's working, you don't just replace people. Like, that's not how football works. To a point, football is a meritocracy. Now, sometimes you have like a first-round pick and a UDFA, and if they're playing about the same level, then you put in the first-round pick, because in theory, first-round pick, Dave, more potential. As I adjust, because I'm starting to get uncomfortable again in my chair. Like, you don't just put in Reisner because all of a sudden, like, you sign him. Oh, we got to play him. It's only $2.5 million. You're not exactly like giving this guy like $1 billion to play guard. This is what I said. That doesn't necessarily mean he's better. And Ingram and Cleveland are better. Now, one thing I want to point out that I found really interesting that somebody mentioned. Hey, send me some of that, Joseph. Cheers, my friend. Are Cleveland and Ingram scheme fits? I don't think Cleveland's what they want anymore out of the guard position. I think Ingram's what they want. And they've showed that by running more power runs, more gap runs, more duo than zone runs. Ingram can run zone, but he can also run like power plays in a much better fashion than Ezra can. Ezra is more of the quick athlete, more nuanced, and able to climb to the second level and all those things. I think they're going to, whoever replaces Ezra at guard, going to be more of a power guy. And we'll see if that works. But they like to run more inside zone and duo than they like to do wide zone. Vikings were a wide zone team under Lakubiaks, under Pat Shurmur. And I think that's kind of where we're sitting right now.
So far, Mateo, yes.
I also think they're trending towards being busts, but they're not busts right now. And
yeah,
I think
what I said so far.
Yeah, I think that's the nuance. I love this. Richie Cunningham for a head coach. Yep. And Fonzie will be his offensive coordinator. I love it. And then Chachi will be the defensive coordinator. And we'll have Joni in the front office. God, happy days. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right, we have just a few more minutes left.
I want to answer Clifford right quick. He said, okay. Put Reisner at left guard if Cleveland's not your plans for 2024 and beyond. I was talking with Darren, my partner on Two Bloggers today, Clifford, and we discussed just that thing, especially if we get through the next couple games and we still haven't won anything and they start trading off assets, Cleveland would be a good one to target to trade off. Tyler has written about it. And moving Reisner in there at that point is perfect timing. And then you can keep Reisner. Supposedly they hinted that he will be kept next year or whatever. That's the whole reason he brought the family up, etc. You have a replacement at that point, and it could be relatively effective. And it may happen. We may see that. But hopefully let's win some games and see what turns out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it would be great to be able to just kind of slide him in there if they believe that he's a long-term option. We don't know. We don't know how the front office feels about him. At the end of the day, they had to bring in somebody to replace Oli Udoh, and Reisner was arguably the best choice. And will it work? I don't know. But so far, Reisner's been a good signing overall because he's depth and he hasn't had to play. Like, to me, that's fine. Like, if he has to play, then he needs to play well when he does. And that's what he's paid for. But it's also great that the offensive line is playing so well. And some of the reasons, and you look at a couple of really clean pockets that the Vikings had, that also kind of exposes Kirk Cousins a little bit and what he is and isn't able to do, where, I have a clean pocket and I can't do anything from it. Well, can I create? Can I make my own luck? Can I make something happen when nothing's available? Right now, the answer is no. He had a nice play where he kind of scrambled out of the pocket and hit Addison on a shallow cross on I think it was 2nd and 20, and they got 17 yards on it. So I want to see more, and that's why I want a new quarterback. I want to see that player be able to do some of those things that we see from everybody else. I want to see that mobility. I want to see the ability to attack and create, make your own luck. Right now, the Vikings can't do it. And they're going to have to, if they want to really pull themselves out of this hole, Dave, they're going to have to make their own luck. And you know how we've made our own luck here in Vikings First and SKOL, Dave?
Yes.
We've made our own luck by being honest and producing great content. And that's why we would like you to subscribe, and ring the bell. And we also have subscriptions for our YouTube channel, which is a great way to support the show. You can do super chats for a one-time quote unquote donation to the show, or you can set up a monthly thing for $3, $6, or $15, and you get perks along with that. We've already had one listener on the show
Davey
join
James.
us to talk about the Minnesota Vikings. And if you join that $15 tier, you can do that too. Join us, have some fun, talk ball, and we're going to be having a lot more opportunities to do some things here moving forward, and you won't want to miss it. Draft season is going to be chopped full of great stuff, and there's going to be more opportunities to do videos. There's going to be opportunities to have short videos where we just talk, hey, let's talk about a prospect today. 10 minutes, boom, bang, done. And we're going to have a lot of fun here this year. And if you want to continue to support the show and help us grow, that's a great way to do it. Or if you are a potential sponsor, hit us up, because we are looking to add sponsors to our show to help us grow. And in turn, we will help you as well. So a couple things to be just knowledgeable of. And we are so close to 1,300 subscribers. Please like, subscribe, ring the bell to help us get over that 1,300 plateau. We only started like March 13th, and we're already at that level. And we hope to be over 3,000 by the end of the football season. And with your support, we can get there. In the meantime, Dave, that's going to be the show today. It was a fun one. We had a lot of really good discussion, and the Vikings are unfortunately 1-4, but there is still hope. And I'm going to have a lot more on this team moving forward, and we are going to be in a great spot. And with all that said, as everybody's talking in the chat, go Twins. They play a playoff game tomorrow. My dad's coming over. We're going to drink some beers, watch some football right after you take Odie to the vet. Yeah, he's got to get some shots to make sure he's a healthy boy. But outside of that, ladies and gentlemen, have a great day. We will see you Wednesday night, 6 p.m. Central Time here on this very YouTube channel. I'm Tyler. He's Dave. What do we say?
Go Raiders!
That
SKOL
and
Vikings.
SKOL Vikings, baby.
Like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notifications. It helps us grow this community that we all love, our Minnesota Vikings. And on behalf of Tyler Forness and myself, Dave Stefano, thank you so dearly for watching the Real Forno Show. SKOL, everyone!